All right. Welcome back in, everyone, to the Go 247 podcast. I'm Glenn West, the senior writer here at the site, also joined by Sonny Ship, our recruiting guru and longtime writer here at the site as well. Um, we won't hash out the gory details of this last weekend's game between LSU and Tennessee, but Sonny and I are just going to kind of give our thoughts here on what LSU can start to do to make some improvements, start showing some steady improvement here as conference play goes along. LSU, of course, dropped that game 40 to 13 to Tennessee on Saturday. Not really much, not really many positives you can take out of that one, Sonny. But I think there's certainly some avenues here that I think LSU is going to have to start leaning into. Going to have to start improving. Coach Kelly touched on just a couple of them in his post game presser on Saturday. I'm sure we'll get into it more on Monday with him. But just your overall thoughts on what you saw, what you think this team needs to do moving forward, and we can just bounce it off of that going forward here.
Yeah, I think when you're trying to instill a culture and you're trying to make the changes that Brian Kelly has made, you obviously want to have those positive moments that you can build off of. But in that process, there's going to be those negative moments that are going to give you those teaching moments, and that's what this is. And boy, did they get a lot of teaching moments that came out of Saturday. Now, the key is the key and the big test this week is going to be taking those teaching moments and being able to get those in, as well as get your preparation in for Florida, get the mindset of the team right. uh, get everything, pull everyone back in. And that's not to say that the wings have spread out and people they're losing it or anything like that. It's just you got to regroup. You got to get everybody back on the same page. And this is where the character of this team is going to really show. BJ Ojolari, he's off to a good start. It wasn't really a big factor on Saturday, but he's a guy that they're going to look to. Wearing that number 18 jersey. Mike Jones Jr. hasn't really played a lot lately. Is he still going to be that leader that he was looked at going into the season? That's going to be a big test. That's going to be a little challenge for him. He's going to have to pull that from inside. Ali Gay, same thing. You got a guy who is one of your senior captains, and you've got a lot of people saying, okay, well, how come Savion Jones hasn't really played? And so you've got some areas where some guys, if they're not fully and completely bought in, you could see where they would have a little bit of a tough time with, do we take the easy route and do things like we used to, or do they do what Brian Kelly has said? You do it the hard way. You go through the process and you go through your habits that we've created. And so I think that's going to be the biggest challenge and the biggest test this week. I think that's probably going to be as big of a challenge and as critical to what happens in Gainesville as the actual game plan and the X's and O's on each side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, you can't afford to go into this game with disconnect. I think is the biggest thing for me. When you look at this roster, you have so many new players you've tried to ingratiate throughout the offseason. I think part of the problem is particularly on offense is that they're still looking for those leaders on offense. You mentioned, Ali Gay, Ojolari, Mike Jones. Those are all defensive guys. They are still, I think, in search of those leaders that they can really count on the offensive side of the football. And when you're dealing with some of the injuries that LSU's dealing with right at the time, you got Garrett Dallinger with a banged up knee. He's got a broken hand. You got Will Campbell, who went out on Friday night in a really scary situation there. Still hoping to learn some more details on whether he's going to be okay for this year. But there's just a lot of uncertainty, I think, and I guess we can start with the offense here. Just my initial takeaway, what my initial thoughts are with the offense. You've got to lean into what Jaden Daniels does best. I mean, we've tried to see him as a pocket passer. You saw him do that pretty well against New Mexico a few weeks ago. That was the peak Jaden Daniels, the optimal Jaden Daniels that I think you wanted to see in SEC play. But since then, it's just been a bit of a nosedive. And I know a lot of people are talking about just the drop off in the passing game the last couple weeks. And there was some empty stats I think on Saturday. He did end up throwing for 300 yards, but in the key moments when LSU really needed to keep pace with Tennessee in that first half, the offense just wasn't able to execute. They weren't able to execute on those fourth down calls. They weren't able to execute and extend drives in that first half. And I think it really cost them in down the stretch of that game in terms of just trying to keep the defense off the field and trying to at least match Tennessee in points. So I think what you really have to do moving forward here with Daniels is really lean into that run game, really lean into what he does with his mobility. They tried to take their shots. They were a little bit more aggressive on Saturday, but just from what we've seen in 5 games, that's not his strength. That's not his strong suit. He likes to get the ball out quick. He likes to go through his first or second read and get that ball out. I think that's what you really have to lean into. And something that Coach Kelly told us on Saturday after the game was that they've been a little bit slow to the punch in terms of 7-man protection, in terms of getting a extra tight end or an extra offensive lineman out on the field to really help open up or kind of extend the time that Jaden has in the pocket, or open up some more running lanes with an extra blocker. I think you're really going to see them lean into that this week. By throwing out an extra tight end, by throwing out an extra O lineman on offense. And I think you could very well see a different looking offense next week. I'd like to get your thoughts just kind of on that, and just what you think about where the offense needs to go in particular.
Well, I think, I think 6 games in, Mike Denbrock had the spring, and you're 6 games in. And to me, they're still searching personnel wise.
Yeah.
They're still trying to feel that out. They're still trying to, and look, let's not, it's not doom and gloom. LSU got absolutely motorboated Saturday. There's no question about that. Tennessee just ran all over them. Okay, but you also have to take some things into consideration. LSU had three starters out on offense. When you consider Amani Gooden, when the most explosive running back that they have, he was not in there. The running game accounted for 17 yards with the running backs on Saturday. Okay, you're not going to beat anybody like that. Tennessee, on the other hand, ran for I want to say 263
Yeah.
or something, something like that. And granted, Hooker had about 56 yards on that, but you've got to get more production out of your running game. I mean, you're one dimensional at that point. The times that and Jaden Daniels on, we talk about throwing the ball, but I think another thing that he's really struggled with this year is on the zone read.
Yeah.
It seems like when he should keep it, he hands it, and when he should hand it, he keeps
Yeah.
it. And so they're still trying to find their groove in that aspect also. You got to look at the wide receiver rotation right now. You've got to. I mean, look, you have tried to force feed the ball to Kayshon Boutte through 6 games now, and it's not happened. It's not happened. You can, whether the offense is better with him with him or without him in the lineup. I think that remains to be seen, because all you've really seen is him in the lineup. But I think you really have to look at it now, and you got to say, okay, who is our best 3 receivers right now? Because when you look at it, your best pro prospect in Kayshon Boutte, he's 4th on the team in receiving right now, and he's averaging about, I think, just over 7 yards of reception. This is a guy that was averaging gaudy numbers going into this season right there.
Yeah.
Jack Best, your leading receiver from a year ago, is now tied for 7th in receiving this year. And so, to me, that just points, and that just highlights a problem, to where if you're trying to get your best 11 on the field, well, first, what you got to do is you got to get your best personnel on the field, at each group, at each level. And LSU just hasn't been able to do that. Mike Denbrock hasn't been able to find the rhyme or reason for that, but that's going to be crucial. I mean, look, if you're worried about continuing to get better, to win as many games as you can, to to make that next step, then you really have to look at some tough decisions that Brian Kelly is going to have to make. Obviously, it wouldn't be a very a very popular decision with a lot of folks if if Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and Jeray Jenkins are your main three receivers that you trot out there. But I think that those have been your three most productive so far. you
Yeah.
know and,
Yeah.
and and so you run the risk of of pushing Booty away. But also what you got to look at too is that he's got 6 games left, and look, I
He's
don't
gone.
think I don't think he plans on being here next year,
He's gone.
whether
No.
it's the NFL or somewhere else. I think the writing is on the wall
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. No.
And so that's kind of, for me, that's kind of taking into consideration, where the offense is missing the missing pieces that they had. But at the same time, it's not a write-off. It's not a free pass, because I think offensively, just the personnel and getting the right personnel on the field has been a complete cluster from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of we kind of came in thinking that the receiver room was going to be super deep and super talented, and it was just about getting those guys in the right spots. And I think we kind of overlooked, a lot of people, fans, media alike, kind of overlooked how difficult that was going to be, trying to implement all these different receivers into this rotation. And so I'm right there with you. And I think it's becoming more telling by the game. What's the one game that Kayshawn missed this year? It was the New Mexico game, and that was the most efficient the passing offenses looked all season. Now, look, it was New Mexico. I'm not trying to say that New Mexico is Auburn or Tennessee or anything like that, but the passing offense was running very smoothly against New Mexico with Jack Bash, with Malik Neighbors, with Brian Thomas, with Jeray Jenkins. All those guys had big moments in that game. I tend to agree with you. You can't keep trying to force feed Kayshawn the ball. There was a concerted effort, I think, on Saturday to try to get him a lot of touches early, and they just didn't go anywhere. He had to think about 3 or 4 catches early in the game that just didn't really get him much. They tried a little end around with him, a reverse play with him early in the game that only got him about a yard or two. I mean, they weren't able to get him up the field, which is where he's made his NFL money, is when they're getting to him downfield. And it's just something that Jaden's not looking to do at quarterback right now. And
And
so
he's not the same Kayshawn that he was too.
that's true. Yeah.
He's not. I mean, he played last year. They had him listed at 195. You got him at 205 this year. I think that the 10 extra pounds that he's carrying, you look at his upper body, you look at his arms. I mean, you can see that he's packed on some muscle,
Hmm.
but the explosiveness doesn't quite look, doesn't look like it did, the first couple of years. The quickness doesn't seem to be there. And then just that suddenness, and not only that suddenness when you look at his athletic profile, but that suddenness mentally. It seems like everything is just a step behind.
Yeah.
Everything is just a step slow from what it was before. Even when they did even when they did early, they did the little touch pass where Daniels catches it and just tosses it to Kayshawn.
Right.
He didn't look explosive at all on that. I mean, he almost looked like a tight end trying to run that. And not being mean, not trying to be insulting or anything, but that's what I keep going back to where you've got to take all of that into consideration. You've got to take number 7 out of it, take the name out of it, and just look at the body of work. And
Hmm.
if you look at the body of work so far through 6 games, I don't think there's any question that he is not one of your he's not playing like one of your top 3 receivers so far.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
I'm
that's
right
a tough
there.
situation. It's a tough situation because you run the risk of, you obviously have to worry about a locker room that you have to maintain. You've got all those things that you have to take into consideration. But look, if we can see it, if fans can see it, players see it too.
Yeah.
They see a lot more of each other than we get to see of them. They hear a lot more about what's going on than we get to hear about what's going on.
I agree.
And so, I think you're at the point. I think you're at the point of the season now to where Brian Kelly has to make some tough decisions. Brian Kelly has to make some decisions that are going to ruffle some feathers. But then on the same time, on the same sense, you're going to also have some, you're also going to have some people who are going to say, okay, let's go. This is kind of, this is what we've been waiting on. They've been looking for a shot in the arm or something,
Yeah.
That's what this offense needs. It needs some sort of adrenaline
Yeah.
punch. And, someone's got to give it to them. And I think I think if someone's going to give it to this offense, it's probably going to be Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think so. I was just about to get to Malik. He's been your most consistent guy in terms of change of direction, getting upfield, breaking up, breaking for big gains on short passes. He's the guy that I'm looking at. And then also, I mean, look, there's a whole 6 games now of work of LSU really going hard at Mason Taylor, the freshman tight end. And I think if you're gonna continue leaning in on him, you've got to draw up some plays for him to where it's not just, okay, Daniels looking at him for a check down throw for 3 yards. If you're Jaden Daniels and you're gonna be looking for Mason Taylor, you might as well draw up some plays for him because he's getting a large volume of the targets here. Kind of really all 6 games. I mean, he's been a huge part of this passing offense, and they certainly need to get him the ball in some more advantageous positions where he can really move the sticks, get the ball downfield, and turn loose for some bigger gains. But yeah, I'm right there with you on Malik Neighbors. I think he's got to be the guy to carry this offense. I think there were some positives with John Emery there for a few weeks, but they just were not able to get the run game going at all. If you kind of go to a 7-man protection like Coach Kelly hinted on Saturday, and we'll see how much they do that. I mean, we're not. They probably won't make it a signifying thing of their offense just to go 7-man protection the whole time. But if you have that out there for the run game, you can open up some holes. Maybe get an extra blocker there on the field. I think that really helps LSU in terms of opening up the offense a little bit more, even if it takes an extra weapon off the field because. Jaden's not really looking for the third or fourth receiver on a play. He's looking for those first couple and then he's taken off. So having that extra blocker there will really help. I guess we can switch over to defense here for a little bit. For me, the secondary play has just not been there the last couple weeks. And again, I think it's one of those things where you can kind of point to some injuries. Major Burns being out the last couple weeks. We've heard about really all offseason at the beginning of this season just how much of a communicator he is, how much they really rely on him in that respect. And he's been out the last couple weeks and is really – you could tell the communication has been down a little bit in the secondary. They've tried switching Jarek Bernard-Converse to safety. It worked against Auburn. It didn't really work as well against Tennessee. They were getting beaten a lot of one-on-one coverages for really the first time all year. You could really say that LSU kind of took a beating in one-on-one coverage in the secondary. And I think that has to be a concern. That has to be a little bit more of a focus this week, just in terms of getting those guys back on track. For you, Sonny, what do you think about this secondary and about just kind of the defense as a whole and what they need to do to try to improve moving forward here?
Yeah, I think Major Burns is a big loss. I think when Brian Kelly commented on how great he was at communicating and that was one of his biggest assets back there. So that's a big task to put on the shoulders of Jarek Bernard-Converse, a guy who in a perfect world should be playing corner on the outside. And so that's an adjustment. You're not only are you taking, you have Mason Smith off the field, you have your best DT off the field. Now you have your best communicator off the field in Major Burns. And then you're taking, who you thought was going to be your top corner coming into the season, and you're putting him at a position that he has some experience at, but it's not his go-to position. It's not what he's practiced since he's been here. And so, to me, in effect, what you're doing now is you don't have 2 holes. Now you got 3 holes on defense. And granted, Colby Richardson has played well this season, But we saw, we saw him. He got hit. What was it? 2 or 3 times, at least twice for PI.
I think it was 3. Yeah,
Okay, was it 3? Okay, yeah,
yeah,
I thought it was 2. And so, so you saw him kind of get picked on a little bit, and you know, and so when I look at the defense and I knew that Tennessee was going to make some big chunk plays. That's what they've done all year. You knew they were going to test the corners. You knew they were going to, throw the deep ball. They were going to go vertical. What was really disappointing Saturday, and what they absolutely must do better when they go to the Swamp, is tackling. They
yeah.
missed so many tackles on Saturday, and so many opportunities. They missed there's at least 2 sacks of Hendon Hooker that jump out at me that they had a chance to get. Obviously, the forced fumble that they weren't able to recover was one of them. But
Ollie Gay got to him a couple times and just couldn't wrap him up.
and just couldn't wrap him up. Yeah, and you got to give Hendon Hooker credit. I mean, he's a
Yeah,
big guy. He's an athletic guy. He's good. He's a lot better. He was a lot better than I thought he was. Than I thought he would be entering the season. This season, I mean, he's just played lights out. And LSU looked at when you look at it, he was only 17 to 27 on Saturday, and that would probably be, I don't know what that comes out to percentage wise, but he had only gone under
63.
60%. What's
Yeah,
that? He had
63.
gone on. Yeah, okay. He had only gone under 60% one time, so that was one of the better performances if you look at just at his stats by that defense. But the tackling, and the missed opportunities was just atrocious. It was bad. Not being able to substitute because of Tennessee's frenetic pace. That obviously was something that you had to take into consideration. But to beat a good team like Tennessee, and Tennessee is a good team, to beat a good team like Tennessee when you're minus 5 starters,
Yeah,
you've got to have a lot of things go your way. A lot of
yeah,
things go your way. When you fumble the opening kickoff, you give up the big punt return. You spotted them 10 points right there. And it was, you can't do that. You can't do that against a good team. You can't lose the turnover battle. You can't lose the special teams battle. You can't get beat in every facet of the game, or it's going to look like a 40-13 game. The good thing is that there are some things that LSU can take from this game that they can correct, and hopefully that they can learn from, that they can go to the Swamp. And that's not a game, I don't think that's a game that LSU goes into as a big underdog.
no, yeah. They're pretty
I
much
know that the early spread came out with Florida, I think, favored by 2.5.
it's
But
pretty much a
if
push.
I'm looking at this game right here, and I'm looking at LSU in Florida, I'm saying, okay, this is a pick 'em right here.
Yeah,
And anytime you go on the road as a pick 'em, you got to feel pretty good. You got to feel pretty good about your chances. So, I think that defensively, Anthony Richardson is not going to be an easy matchup by any means. And I think that he's going to look to run the ball more than Hendon Hooker did.
yeah,
And so, I think you're going to have to spy him more than more than you had to worry about with Hendon Hooker. But look, if you're letting Florida run for 250, rush for 250 yards, it doesn't matter how much you spy on the quarterback, because you're just, you're losing that battle in the trenches. And if they're able to run the ball, well, then, they're going to have a lot of opportunities on the back end to go over the top of your defense too. So, it's going to take a really strong effort by LSU in the Swamp. But I don't think that this is a game that you should look at, that fans should look at and be, and think that it's doom and gloom just because of what happened at Tennessee. There were going to be times like this. Brian Kelly knew that there were going to be games like this. And like when I was talking to someone inside the building, the key is not to have multiple, is not to have too many, and not to have them back to back.
yeah.
Because, you go out, you have another, if you go out and you have another disappointing effort in the Swamp, well, then, like Brian Kelly said, you do it once. I forget what he say. Once is a coincidence. Twice
Twice is something is twice, and third
the
is
third time's a habit.
third time's a habit. I can't remember what the
Right,
second
right,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And so, you don't want to have those negative moments like that.
Yeah.
because then that is when the character and how close this team really comes into question.
Yeah, and I think that if there's one advantageous position for this defense to be in, it's that you're absolutely right. Anthony Richardson is not Hendon Hooker from an accuracy standpoint at the quarterback spot. So I think you're going to have some opportunities there as a secondary to get your fundamentals back on track, make your tackles, be a little bit more solid in coverage, and force Hooker and force Richardson, I should say, to really have to beat you with his arm. And because I think LSU can win in that kind of scenario. Look, Hooker averaged 14.1 yards of completion last week against LSU. And you could make the argument that a lot of it came on yards after the catch. I mean, LSU was not giving up a whole ton of deep balls in that game. They had the one touchdown, I think, in the first half that put them up 20-0. That was on a deep ball. But I'm pretty sure Hooker was just taking what LSU was giving him in the middle of the field and letting his receivers make the big plays on the yards after the catch because LSU wasn't making the tackles. And so I do think tackling is going to have to be kind of your main focus defensively. Tackling and also, look, they got gashed in the run game, and we asked Coach Kelly after the game what was happening with the run defense because that had been a part of the identity of this group that had been pretty consistent for most of the first 5 games. And Kelly kind of just plainly said, you got to coach him better. And that was a consistent answer throughout the entire press conference on Saturday was, we got to coach better. We got to coach better. We got to coach better. And I just don't know how much you can really take away from that as a media or a fan. But on the field, it certainly looked like a team that was just not prepared for that moment, not prepared for that top 10 battle against a really solid opponent. You have another opportunity this weekend to kind of try to build some of that good faith back up, within the team, outside of the team. I think it's going to be a really important week for you to be pretty fundamentally sound. And if you can go into Gainesville, a place where there's always some really, really fun battles between LSU and Florida in Gainesville. You just look at the last two. You got the shoe incident and the kicking into the 57-yarder into the fog. And then, the year before that, it was the time before that, it was Joe Burrow throwing an interception, a pick six there that really sealed the deal for Florida there in the late fourth quarter. So this is going to be a tight game. I don't think this is going to be this is going to be exactly like Vegas is predicting right now. It's going to be a pick 'em. It's going to be a tight one, and LSU is going to have to be a lot more fundamentally sound. I think for on both sides of the ball to be able to win this one and get back on track here in SEC play.
Good question for you.
Sure.
I see a lot of fans get really amped up and feel like Brian Kelly's tossing coach speak out there when he says that we got to coach better. We got to coach
Yeah.
better. What's your take on that?
Yeah. So I think part of it's on coaching, but I also think he doesn't want to lose the locker room. He doesn't want to throw any of his players or his team under the bus.
That's my thing. So what do fans want him to say?
Yeah, exactly.
What do fans want him to say? If he came out and he said, look, Malik Neighbors is not run, Malik Neighbors is sloppy on his routes. Kayshawn's not really engaged. We've got some offensive linemen who just really haven't progressed, haven't stepped up. If he got specific like that, what do you think the transfer portal would look like come November and December? So that's one thing that I don't get, because I would rather him say, and I think he's being honest there. I think he's being honest. We've got to coach better.
Yeah.
Now, they may feel better about it if he would get into the technicals of what we need to coach better, how we need to coach better, what we can do to coach better. Maybe that's what they want to hear. But I think that, when he says we need to coach better, I'm like, okay, that to me, that's better than him throwing players under the bus.
Yeah,
they're taking responsibility. He's saying, look, I'm being paid $9 million a year. It starts with me. I got to do a better job.
Yeah.
And, I think he's taken ownership in that. And so when I hear him say that, while it may be coach speak, just because it's so normal, it's across the board taking this coach speak, I think he's saying the right things.
Yeah. No, I think so too.
I think he's saying
You got to
all the
keep that.
right things for the betterment of the program.
You got to keep that stuff internal. You can't go out there publicly bashing any one player, any one position group, anything like that. And look, I mean, I've been at every single Brian Kelly press conference since he got here. He's been very open with the media in his answers. I mean, like he has gone into some specifics on what they need to do throughout the season to get better. He's even, I mean, look, the very first press conference back in spring, what was one of the big things, one of the big grabbing headlines was that we need to get Kayshawn under wraps. We got to bring him in. It's been a process of building that relationship with me and him, and with our offense, and with how we're going to use him and whatnot. So he's gone into some specifics about players before. I just think that when you get godsmacked like that, the last thing you want your players to see or read or hear from your head coach is them, kind of throwing him under the bus. And so
Right.
I think that's stuff you can handle in meetings
That's what
internally.
Mondays are for.
That's what
That's what
Mondays are for.
Mondays are for after the press conference and you regroup your team together. That's what those are for. Those position meetings is when you're saying, okay, you've got to run better routes. You can't be so lazy out of your breaks. You've got to, your offensive line room. Look, we need some of you guys to step up. It's now or never. It's what are we going to do? And you've got to rally the troops and you've got to send your subliminal messages, but you got to do it behind closed doors.
Yeah.
You don't do it in front of the media. So I hope he continues to give that coach speak all year, because if he does and he's addressing it behind closed doors, the program's going to be so much better off for it.
And you keep the locker room in more unison there. But with that being said, special teams. Do we want to talk about special teams?
Oh, geez. Can we
No.
just punt? Can we punt that?
Yeah, we can punt that one.
I mean, we can wrap up special teams really, really easy. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
It is atrocious.
yeah.
It's atrocious. It's atrocious from a fundamental
Fundamentals.
standpoint.
Yeah.
It's atrocious. It was atrocious from an organization standpoint out of the gates,
Mm-hmm.
and it hasn't gotten, and it's not getting any better. Now players have to make plays. Coaches have to put the right players in the right situations to let them make plays, but you've got to do something to where you're not going to turn special teams around in the middle of the season to where it all of a sudden becomes a weapon. But
Right.
what you've got to get it to a point to where it doesn't completely kill you.
It's
You know,
not
you're
costing you
gonna
points.
give up you're gonna have your bad plays. You're gonna have your bad moments, but you can't have those back-to-back moments. You can't have
Yeah.
those multiple moments in games, because those multiple moments in games lead to multiple scores.
Yeah.
You can go on the road. You can win it. You can win a game by giving a team, by giving them a touchdown on special teams. You can overcome that. It ain't easy, but you can overcome that. But you start spotting multiple touchdowns on special teams, and all of a sudden, those little mistakes, then they start spilling over into defense. They start spilling over into offense. I mean, we saw a substitution penalty on each side of the ball Saturday.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
look at it, and you say, okay, how many times can we get caught in this
Yeah.
situation? And that goes back to the organization on the sideline. I mean, you saw Brian Kelly lighten into Cortez Hankton a couple of times. You saw him lighten into several a couple of times. And so I think that just the overall of the organization on the special teams, and getting that connection with your personnel, from the assistant coaches to their personnel that they're dealing with, getting that symmetry, getting that I guess that feeling to where they're all sitting around singing "Kumbaya"
Yeah.
is what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But that whole synergy just seems off.
Yeah. I'm with you. I mean,
Special teams in the biggest way.
that opening kick was just a microcosm of what has been a problem all year long. I mean, the communication there between Besh and the coaching staff there on the sidelines, where he had to be on the other side of the field essentially, and they had to really rush that. And the guy kicked a booch kick that was 15 yards in front of where Besh was predicting the ball to go, and it was a tough play. You got to still make the catch, but when you're switching sides of the field, when the guy is literally about to put his leg into the ball, it's just not a good look. And so I'm with you there. You got to get to the point where special team isn't costing you points. LSU spotted them 10 points on special teams. I mean, yeah, you can say the defense should have held, from 25-yard line, but you can't give them that kind of position. You can't give an offense like that kind of field position. And so if you can just get to a point where you're just throwing up the fair catch signal, catching the ball, letting the offense take over wherever it needs to, then I think you're going to be okay. And just don't try to do too much, because right now it's just like every time somebody kicks it off or punts it to LSU, it's a big, big kind of you're holding your breath kind of thing, and you just got to get to a point where that's not an issue. So,
Yeah,
um,
some things should be like clockwork.
yeah,
Some things you should be able to do without having to put much thought into it. Kicking an extra point.
yeah,
That's one. Granted, you got a new kicker to get into the season and stuff, but by this point, by this time of the year, kicking an extra point should be pretty fundamental. Kicking a 27 to 33-yard field goal should be pretty fundamental. Although, don't tell that to Will Reichard in Alabama,
yeah,
because we saw how close that game was
yeah,
because of two missed kicks.
yeah,
But just certain, some things should be. On the long punt return, the 58-yard punt return, one guy overran the ball. Yeah, two missed tackles right there, Mike Jones Jr. and then somebody else, and just those kind of plays right there, or when you get a chance to make that tackle in a game like that, to where that you're not, that the misses and the miscues, that there's a very small margin for error. They just piled up way too soon, way too quickly for LSU to even be able to overcome that. And then the fourth down gambles, the one that I love the idea of taking the three when you're down 10
yeah,
nothing. At that point, I think you need to get some points on the board. You need to get the crowd saying, okay, now we're good. Now we're in it. We got some points on the board. You got that off your back. And when you miss that, and then the one before the half, to me, is just inexcusable. That's just
yeah.
inexcusable.
Ellie,
On the one hand, you feel like, okay, we've got to get some points, we got to make something happen, but then you've also got to consider the negative consequence of
yeah,
that. You still, if you go into the half down 20-7, you're still going in with some momentum.
yeah.
But
And
then
look,
when you gave them that field goal, any momentum you had, you immediately shifted to the Tennessee side. And knowing that they were getting the ball coming out of the half, I think that should have probably gotten as much consideration, saying, okay, if we don't get this and they go down and get a field goal and then they get the ball coming out of the half, this game could be over.
yep, and
And to
that's
me,
exactly
that's
what
what it
happened.
was. When Tennessee got that field goal, they went in at half. When they came out and scored that touchdown out of half, that game was over.
It was
It
a
was over
it
right
was
there.
it was a collective sigh, I think, out of the Tiger Stadium when that field goal ended up happening. So, yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. That 4th and 10 call, I don't get. I'll never be able to get. Kelly told us after the game it was it was teetering on the edge of their analytics that they should go for it. Um, but I mean, there was just nothing about that offense that led you to believe that they would be able to convert that 4th and 10. And not only do you not convert it, but you get sacked for like an 8-yard loss, and they start with, pretty much the ball on their own 40 or at their 40-yard line, LSU's 40-yard line. So, yeah, just a lot of stuff that needs to be corrected. We'll see if they can start doing it. Sonny, I appreciate you hopping on with us today.
Yeah.
We'll be back at the end of the week giving us some more detailed thoughts on Florida and what to expect with that matchup. But until then, we'll catch you guys later.